9640 and 9660 kind of all together. But the main two is the 9600, which also incorporates the 9600.1. So I had you guys all get a bunch of them because there's Shipman and Goodwin's policy of their 9000 series, which is regarding the bylaws. And we have our own, which is 9600 and 9600.1. And so we wanted to sort of combine and update our policy without losing some of the flexibility we had in our old policy. So if you look at the new version that we wish to adopt after we repeal the old, it's just called 9600, and we've incorporated again 9600 and 9600.1. So the very first paragraph, the only real change from lines 5 to 26 is really just the 9600 policy. And there's only two changes, and one is that we titled process on line 5. And then on lines 15, 16, and 17, I just added in one line because the Shipman and Goodwin policy specifies that the revision and development of policies and bylaws comes from the superintendent. And we have ours come out of our policy committee, which incorporates the superintendent. So I just added that line in. So, you know, this is all up for discussion.
Yeah. Do you want me to let you finish?
No.
Okay. The one piece I would say about that is I agree that that's 95% of the time would be the case. There's two scenarios I can think of. One, hopefully we'd never be in this scenario again, where we're dealing with COVID, where I believe, at least I did in my previous district, I think happened here, superintendent brought it right to the board because of the timing required to put in COVID related policies. But there could be a time where it has to come forward. The other time could be, we could have a scenario, and I don't see this happening, but I think you have to kind of think about all these things throughout. If the superintendent was trying to put forward a policy and two members of the committee did not find it satisfactory or appropriate, and so it could get stalled in committee. I think that's the purpose why you bring it forward. I mean, I even go beyond 95%. I don't see that really happening. Like, there has to be an avenue for the superintendent to bring policy directly to the board if it was needed to be the case. So that's just what I'll share.
So I think that it's actually covered somewhere else. Let me just.
I thought I saw something about emergency scenario.
So, I mean, there was definitely some wording about emergency, but I'm thinking specifically about coming from the superintendent, and I want to say, give me a sec. Maybe we could sort of just change that so that it's from the policy committee and the superintendent, or the superintendent.
I was thinking and/or. Yes.
Or.
Yep.
That's an easy fix. Because it's kind of like, it just, the Shipman and Goodwin policy, I'm not sure if you had a chance to read it through. Theirs is very stark. Like, it only comes from the superintendent, and it wasn't really flexible enough. And so I was thinking more along the lines of the general policies, but I'm thinking that there was something in here where it was.
I thought I read something too. I think it was changed. Like, if you look at line,
like there's a couple.
Look at line 80. Except for emergency situations, it's crossed off, and it says generally policies will be adopted, amended, or deleted after two. This was about the timing, you know, two
Right.
members of the board.
Well, there is, so the one that if you look at the first page, it's talking specifically about bylaws. So there's bylaws and there's policies. So the first part is definitely about bylaws. And I think, you know, unless it was something, I can't even come up with a situation where it might come from the superintendent. But
Well, bylaws are policies, but they're policies that the board governs itself with.
So I think that we maybe wouldn't change it under the bylaws, but then under policies we would. Is that?
Well, but then the other question is this, it says process and bylaw, number 5 is process, line 29 is bylaws. And then number 50 is policies, but then it talks about administrative regulations. Should that say administrative regulations instead of policies? Because it seems
No, because
that
there's a
policies are
separate,
covered in process. You know?
so, hang on. So when we talk about administrative regulations, that's policy 9640.
Oh, here's something, under bylaws, line 74. Policies that deal with matters of an emergency nature may be introduced at any regular or special board meeting. So does that cover?
It doesn't say by who,
It doesn't say by who.
so I don't know if the clause before
Yeah.
limits it
That's
to
not-
who.
I see,
That
okay.
would be,
But I could see your point there, Diane, about bylaws not typically coming from the superintendent, but would say, could the and or go on line 70 then, when you talk about policy? Well, I think that's what we want.
Well, yeah, because by the superintendent is taken out, it's
Mhm.
stricken.
all right, so then, yeah, we could say, by the policy committee and or the superintendent, in line 70.
Yep,
Yes.
All right, so let's make a note of that, because I would really like to get this hammered out tonight so that we can move it forward, because this is our rate limiting factor when it comes to policies.
yeah,
All right,
I agree. But just adding or the superintendent there is not enough to cover emergency situations. We might need to
Well,
actually.
maybe on line 74, policies that deal with matters of an emergency nature may be introduced by the superintendent at any regular or special board meeting. Or, it doesn't really
And this should
specify
say
who.
by the policy committee or the superintendent. That's what it should say, 74 to 75.
Well, when we had all the COVID things, a lot of times you came directly to the board, you didn't even go through policy.
That's what I'm saying. And
Like, did any of them go through policy?
I don't believe so.
No, they all came directly to the board. So then we don't really need to say it has to come through the policy committee. We could just say, I just don't know if that's restrictive if we don't add it in.
Policies that deal with matters of an emergency nature may be introduced at any regular or special board meeting, but it doesn't say who. So it probably should say may be introduced by the policy committee or the superintendent at any regular or special board meeting.
Yeah, because I don't think that limits anything. That covers all our bases.
I mean, could a board member, if it's an emergency, could a board member raise it themselves, an individual board member instead of it going through the policy committee?
I can't imagine that situation though, and that stuff usually just comes from the superintendent, because it's usually something that comes from the.
God forbid, I mean, like a major hurricane comes through and half the people's lines are down and we need to come up with some kind of emergency something, and there are only like 5 board members present and
Well, we know where he
superintendent's
lives,
not
so.
around, and the policy committee members aren't among
All
them.
right, that's fine.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. So,
All right, so we'll just put in, on line 74, policies that deal with matters of an emergency nature may be introduced by the superintendent and or policy committee.
Well, you know what, maybe you're right then. If we don't say that, then we're not limiting it.
Right,
So that's, I was trying to say, like, on second thought, I agreed with what you first said, which
I gotta
is.
tell you that.
No, but that's why we talk these things out, because you have to
I mean,
You have to-
if,
consider the scenarios.
yeah, I just, I'm not, I don't have a legal background here, so.
I guess,
Sometimes being too, specific is not as good as leaving
Yeah.
it open. I don't know. Anyone want to weigh in?
I guess
I think the policy committee and or the superintendent is perfect. I think we're covered.
Yeah, because I just wonder if by not listing anybody, any entity there, if it makes it too broad, then just like anybody could
Community
show.
member could come in and say, I
Right,
want an emergency policy.
right. So I feel like we should have something.
All right, we'll leave it at that. We'll add in the vice superintendent and the policy committee on line 74.
Yes.
Perfect.
All right, so,
Stay consistent, you okay with by policy committee and or superintendent? Okay,
okay,
just
You're
sorry.
pulling.
Same cadence. Thank you.
That's usually something I say.
Yes. Learn.
Just for consistency's sake. All right, so I'm assuming everyone has read all this. Was there anything else that anyone wanted to discuss about 9600 and 9600.1 being repealed and replaced with the new 9600. Oh, and just the other thing is, there's a line by number 26, line 26, and there really is no change there. I think that was just an error. Oh, it was probably my fault.
You have wondering, like, why?
Yeah. And then, let's see. So the main thing that I wanted to do in changing the policy was we condensed the two together, and then I kept in the, well, let me backtrack a bit. We're changing it from a 3-read to a 2-read, and that goes for both bylaws and policies. However, I did not include under the bylaw change that you could skip the second read, because I think it's important when you're changing a bylaw to have the 2 reads. And it's not like when you're repealing a policy where you're just saying, well, it's, you know, it's irrelevant now, we're just gonna repeal it, and so we can skip the second read and with a 2/3 vote by. So the language reads that the bylaw will be adopted with 2 reads. And then if you read under policies, the policy part is the newer part, and it pretty much goes along with Shipman and Goodwin's, except for the changes that we have made. And then, like we were discussing on line 80, we crossed off the except for emergency situations, because I didn't want to lose that flexibility of being able to like repeal just, you know, really old, redundant, or not used policies. So that's why we added the at its discretion on line 82. At its discretion, the board may dispense with the 2-reading adoption sequence and move directly from the first read to the vote with a 2/3 affirmative vote of the quorum of the board. So we would do the same thing that we do now, where we would vote to put it forward to the board from policy committee and asking for that skip of the second read.
Did you add that language? Did you mean to use plan, or did you mean those present?
Well, I kept the original wording of quorum, but
We need to have a quorum, so we need to have 5 members in order to transact any business.
right,
So
which would be the number.
now the question is, when you calculate 2/3, the assumption is there's at least a quorum. If there's more than a quorum, but fewer than 9, then you have to calculate 2/3 based on 8 people or 7 people.
Yes, we have to do
or
math.
6 people. Yeah. No, but I just want to know if maybe it makes sense to qualify that, just so it's clear that 2/3 affirmative vote. Members
So I
present,
took
that's
that
gonna be
wording
more.
from our 9600 policy series.
Yeah, that's really thought out, because if you require 2/3 vote of the full board and you have an absent member, let's say, really
Can't
make it difficult
Yeah.
to pass something. So I think it's always 2/3 of a quorum, and usually 2/3 really pop up when you're dealing with bylaws.
But 2/3 of a quorum, see, if you have more than a quorum there, and you say here, 2/3 of a quorum, 2/3 of 5 people is what, like, you only need 3 people when there's 8 people here, or 7 people here.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So.
2/3 of the members
Okay.
present, assuming there's a quorum.
Yeah, I see what
There
you're
has to
saying.
be a quorum.
Would
There has to be a quorum, 2 members, so, yeah, so it should say 2/3 of the members present and voting.
I wouldn't have to.
If someone abstains. We're going down rabbit holes,
I think
but it's
so.
important, because
Yeah,
you can picture if there's some contention over a bylaw,
right,
and somebody doesn't show up because they're sick,
right.
it throws off the whole vote. People, at least the board needs to know, you know, what to expect when we get to a meeting, how many votes are needed to pass.
Right.
It's bedeviling.
Well, I will say that when I took it from the 9600 policy series, I kind of thought about that wording as well, and I thought, well, sure, it should have been a good one, so look at this one more. However, I see your point.
Yeah.
I don't have a problem changing it from quorum to 2/3 affirmative vote of the members present.
Assuming that the quorum had been.
Yeah, because it has to be.
Yeah, because we need the quorum to
Yeah.
do the business, so.
But even if you abstain, it's still a vote. You know what I mean? So all the members.
And I think with an abstention,
It's an affirmative,
It's-
2/3 affirmative.
2/3 of the affirmative.
All right. So is that how we want to word it?
I don't know why you're taking out quorum, because the quorum,
Quorum is understood because
right,
it's inherent, because you have to have a quorum, you can't have to vote.
But I don't think it means that if you have 9 members present, that the quorum is only 5. You know, it's the voting body present.
Well, a quorum is established by the number of eligible voters on a body. So if we have 9 board members, a quorum is always going to be 5, no matter how many people are there. So if you only have 4 people show up to a meeting, can't have a meeting. If you have 7 people show up, a majority would be 4. If you have 8 people show up, the majority would be 5. Or you can calculate 2/3 using your fancy math. I don't math. So that's why, like, if quorum is understood, and we all agree that, because otherwise you
Can't
wouldn't
do the
even be able to
meeting.
carry on any business,
Right.
then it's almost meaningless to say quorum. It's more meaningful and sets the parameters to say, by 2/3 affirmative vote of the members present and voting. Or just, if you say affirmative vote, then you don't have to say and voting. 2/3 affirmative vote of the members present.
I just don't think that the use of the word quorum there is wrong.
It's not wrong,
I think
but
it
it's not
implies-
enough.
but I think it
Falls
is.
short.
So I have a question then. So if we say that we would like to ask Shipman and Goodwin about the use of the word quorum and whether or not we need to be more specific, if we agree with everything else that we've changed in the policy, can we still vote on it tonight to move it forward to the next Board of Ed meeting? Because it obviously couldn't go to the meeting tonight.
And any
Saying
amendments
pending that
yeah,
change.
any amendments you make at this meeting doesn't change the timing. Amendments can occur within readings. You don't have to start over again because you made a change.
but I
Right,
would
but
say
will we be voting to move it
Shipman's
forward?
using quorum there for a reason.
Right,
That's the legal, so they're gonna come back and say, no, that's our recommendation.
Is
Not that they
Shipman's
ever make,
wording?
yeah. Not that they never make a mistake, I'm not saying that, but that they're picking quorum. Quorum will be the 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and so I think it accomplishes with less words what you're
I
trying
think
to
we're
do.
being nitpicky.
Well,
we can
actually, when you
ask.
look at because when you look at the 9600.1 from Shipman, it says the board may dispense with the above sequence and move directly to the adoption phase by 2/3 affirmative vote of the quorum of the board. Is there wording in the Word document that was
So,
which is,
If they're using it that way, then they're saying a minimum of 5 or however many you have above 5. Which is fine. I mean, that's all that I have.
all right, so we could change the wording to that by
Yeah.
2/3 affirmative vote of the quorum. Is that what I have? I have
That is,
2/3 affirmative vote of the quorum.
okay,
That is how it reads,
of the board.
of the board. Line 83, 82 to 85. At its discretion, the board may dispense with the 2 reading adoption sequence and move directly from the first read to the vote with a 2/3 affirmative vote of the quorum of the board.
yep, so that's consistent between the 2 documents that we have from Shipman.
That's where we leave it. What do you think, Maureen? I don't want to.
I think it sounds perfect. Yeah,
Right.
no, I agree with Jen. What Jen read, it should be consistent. I think that's perfect and it covers all bases.
Right, so I mean, everything else is pretty much straightforward. Does anybody have any other comments or questions about the rest of the 9600 new version?
No.
Or any suggestions or typos or inconsistencies, Dr. Cook?
Looks good.
All right. So, so then we're gonna talk about 9640 and 9660, and those are very straightforward, I think. So, pretty much we just took the Shipman and Goodwin versions, and updated ours. So all four of these policies, 9600, 9600.1, 9640, and 9660, we would have to repeal and replace. And so that would be what we would recommend tonight to move forward. And this is based on, so under 9640, our original bylaws, it actually refers to a bylaw that doesn't exist. It says bylaw 9620, and there is no 9620. I think we repealed it. So it's definitely needed to be replaced. But this is pretty much straight from Shipman and Goodwin. Does anyone have any questions or comments on 9640? 9640, just for completeness sake, is the formulation, adoption, amendment, or deletion of administration regulations, formerly the board review of regulations. It's all about you, Dr. Cook.
That seems good to me.
And then 9660 is the suspension of policies, bylaws, or administrative regulations, formerly the suspension or repeal of policy. And the main difference in 9660 is that we changed it from a 2/3 vote to using a majority vote. That was the main thing. The only time it called for a 2/3 was when the no written notice was given when the bylaws needed to be suspended, which I can't even imagine when that would happen.
So here it says a majority vote of all members of the board in attendance at a meeting.
So this mirrors Shipman and Goodwin's own policies for their 9000 series.
Typically, like when this goes in front of the board, as in 9660, 2/3 is referring to bylaw. To approve a bylaw, to withdraw a bylaw, you need the 2/3. They just carry more weight because of it.
Right.
Should have been it's a policy.
Oh, the other thing that I noticed a change from our old policy to the new Shipman and Goodwin's version that we've adapted is that our old policy for 9600 required a 48-hour wait after we vote on it for it to go in front of the board. So it no longer says that, but it does have to be given in writing to the board, prior to the meeting. So we would still have to wait one meeting. But it wouldn't.
So the first reading could be the same night as a policy meeting, as long as copies are run and everyone gets handed or gets emailed, whatever, a copy of the.
Technically, yes, but I don't know that it has to be included in the Board of Ed packet, and if it hasn't been voted on by policy, then I don't know that you could give it that night. But I think, one option would be to move the policy meetings so that they are, not the exact same night. Like, for instance, we had to move the February meeting. And so whatever comes out of that can go directly to the next Board of Ed meeting because it's not on the same night. But it just doesn't specifically say you have the 48-hour wait in this.
So
Would something go in the packet
If we had,
pending an affirmative vote by the policy committee?
yes, but now the issue you're dealing with is how you notice the meeting, the
Okay,
call of the meeting.
okay.
That you have to have at least 24 hours in advance of a regular meeting, I believe, if you amend an agenda. So you might, using your approach, you might want to have a policy committee meeting at least 2 days before a board meeting so that you have time to renotice.
maybe that was the reason for the 48 hours. This one just doesn't specifically say it. I don't think you need to say it. And I think if you're following the rules, it'll kind of automatically come, but I just feel like there's no need. Shipman and Goodwin didn't feel I needed to put it in, and so I left it up as well.
Yeah, another way around that is you do like what we have to do tonight, which is at any regular or special meeting, any regular or emergency meeting, not a special meeting. Special meeting, has to stick to the agenda. Any regular meeting or emergency meeting, the board may choose to add an agenda, open the agenda, add an additional agenda item by vote of the board. So you can get around the 48-hour rule anyway if you just move it at the regular board meeting.
I just think in general, although I like to speed up the process, I think we're speeding it up by dropping it from a 3-read to a 2-read, unless it's something, super important. It's gonna come from the superintendent probably anyways, an emergency thing directly to the board. So I don't think that we need to specifically state the 48 hours. I think we could just leave it out and then, see how it works from there. As I don't think we don't have the ability to do that for bylaw change, and I like it that way because I think it's, more important for that to be well read and understood before it's voted on. And we're reserving that strictly for the ones that we're like deleting that are obsolete, et cetera. So with regards to, like, when we make a motion tonight to say we'd like to move these forward to repeal and replace, that I would not say would be a good recommendation to do it, immediately to the board, because they need time to review what is being replaced and what's being replaced. And that's, a lot.
That doesn't go for amendments, so just repeal and replace, because amendments could be, for example, a statutory amendment that's effective immediately. So you could still get it on the agenda as quickly as possible and vote on it.
I think it's, certain things are just very circumstantial.
Yeah.
All right, I think we're done with the 9600 series. I think we can afford that.
Yeah.
All right, so the next item is number 2, discussion of policies recommended to be rescinded by Shipman and Goodwin. And the first 2 are in the 3000 series, and then the last 8 are in the 4000 series. So if you look at your policy notes that were included in your packet, it goes through the reasons why each policy was advised by Shipman and Goodwin to repeal. So the first one is policy number 3440, inventories, and they said it is not mandatory and may be repealed. We discussed with Stacy Novitz and Art Sickle regarding this policy, and they agreed that the district does not follow this procedure anymore, and so therefore it's not needed. Computer equipment is checked out to teachers and students through the Destiny library systems, like laptops to teachers and Chromebooks to students. So the district, since it no longer follows the procedure, there's no reason to have this policy. Is there any discussion or questions about 3440?
Not for me.
Nope, sounds perfect.
All right, so we move on to policy number 3543, employees self-funding health insurance plan. They've recommended repealing this policy because it's unnecessary and may conflict with existing agreements with the town and collective bargaining agreements, both of which may change more frequently than the policy is revised. Questions or comments on 3543? Okay, moving on then in the 4000 series, policies to rescind. The first one is 4112.6, personnel records. Then Goodman recommend repealing this policy as unnecessary. The majority of the policy relates to the Freedom of Information Act, or FOIA, and compliance with that is statutory. The current language requires legal review, as the FOIA requires that the board respond promptly to requests for information. And the reference to being in compliance with HIPAA is likely unnecessary. Any discussion or comments on 4112.6 personnel records? Okay, policy 4114, transfer reassignment. They recommend rescinding this policy because it is unnecessary. Transfer and reassignment are addressed through collective bargaining. Questions, comments? Okay, policy 4115.1, the evaluation of certified staff. They recommend that we repeal this as unnecessary. The matters addressed are included in the district's teacher evaluation plan, which was updated more recently in accordance with legislative changes. Questions or comments?
What the, we have in the package here, the language from that one.
The language,
Just wanna go back to it because anyway, wanted to make sure the board wasn't giving up a policy statement or direction to the district that there needs to be teacher evaluation or something like that, but that goes more into the way that it's done, which is not really within our purview, so.
okay. Anybody else?
No.
All right, policy 4117.1 retirement. Shipman and Goodwin recommended that we repeal this policy as unnecessary. The policy has not been reviewed since 1991, and its provisions are addressed through the Teachers Retirement Board. Questions or comments? All right, policy 4117.3, dismissal and suspension. Shipman and Goodwin recommend that we repeal this policy as unnecessary, as it provides only that the board will comply with Connecticut law with respect to teacher termination, which goes without saying. Did I skip one?
Uh,
No.
41,
Personnel reduction.
Yeah, I'm sorry. 4117.3, I looked ahead. Shipman and Goodwin recommends that we consider repealing this policy as unnecessary. The provisions of the policy are addressed by statute 10-151 and collective bargaining agreements. That is personnel reduction, 4117.3. Now we're to 4117.4, dismissal and suspension. This states just that we have to comply with Connecticut law with respect to teacher termination, so they recommend that we repeal it as unnecessary. Questions or comments? Dr. Cook, you look deep in thought.
No, that's good.
And the last one is policy 4118, tenure. And Shipman and Goodwin recommends that we repeal this policy as unnecessary, as it provides only that the board will comply with Connecticut law with respect to tenure. So I think the policies, again, to be rescinded, recommended for rescission. Thank you. Would be policy 3440, 3543, 4112.6, 4114, 4115.1, 4117.1, 4117.3, 4117.4, and 4118. So that's what, 10 policies. So what I'm looking for then would be a motion to move these to the Board of Ed for recommending for rescission of those 10.
So moved.
Thank you, Maureen.
and I second.
Thanks, Jen. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, so those will go forward to the Board of Ed, and I would also like a motion for policies 9600, 9640, and 9660 to replace, and we would repeal 9600, 9600.1, 9640, and 9660. Did I do that backwards? Because we're repealing and replacing. So even though they have the same numbers, so we would repeal the old 9600 and 9600.1, 9640 and 9660, and replace with the new 9600, 9640, and 9660.
Correct. So moved.
Thank you, Jen.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. Both of those motions passed. And then we come to, oh, I just wanted to make one last comment, and that is, so we're moving these to go forward. So tonight is January 18th. And so 9600, 9640, and 9660 will require 3 reads, which means that it won't be acted on until March 15th.
The Ides of March.
As long as nothing goes wrong with the other reading. So that's just, so that's how long it takes. And then after that, once it's passed, assuming that it is, then everything will go to the 2 read and hopefully
Lightning
things will
fast.
move along. So, and we're recommending that we, do I need another motion or should I roll it into the first motion that we want to have the recent the policies to skip the first and second, or second and third reads. So we need a different motion. for
Yeah,
that?
you should probably move that separately.
All right, so then I need a motion that we would like to recommend to the board that we will rescind the policies that I already said, 3440 to 4118, and moving it forward to
March 15th, was it?
that we will not do the second and third reads, that we will just have the first read followed by a vote.
So moved.
Thank you, Maureen. That was
Waive
just,
the second and third.
and I second. Thank you. Waived. I'm like stumbling
Yeah,
over
that's how
words
you
here.
did it. Yeah. before.
And Jen, you're seconding for me?
Yes.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor? Aye. All
Aye.
opposed? Okay. Public comment. Wendy, is there anybody? Hello.
There is no one.
Okay. Thank you, Wendy. Oh my
You're
gosh.
welcome.
All right. And our next meeting is February 15th, just which is a reminder. Oh my gosh, and it's 7:08. So I guess we can have a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you. Second.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Bye.
Thank you. And we are
See
adjourned.
you, everyone. Bye.
Okay.